Sean Combs is being kept away from the general inmate population. You say his fame makes him a target.
Metropolitan Detention Center. You can see a group of inmates gathered in the day room when inmates begin to fight. When the camera moves back, some inmates start scattering as others continue to fight.
It's been nearly a month since P. Diddy was arrested and hit with serious federal charges. What does life look like for a celebrity of Diddy's stature inside prison walls? Is he getting the special treatment often rumored for high-profile inmates? And could there be any truth to the whispers that he's fearful for his life inside one of the most dangerous detention centers in the country? Worried someone might attack or even poison him? We're delving deep into Diddy's drastic lifestyle change. Sean Combs, famously known as P. Diddy, or as some now call him, is currently living through what can only be described as a personal horror movie at New York's notorious Metropolitan Detention Center, MDC, in Brooklyn. This is no lavish retreat. This is a facility many have dubbed hell on earth. Gone are the days of red carpets and flashing lights, replaced instead by a grim reality of violence, rampant drug use, constant threats to life and communal showers. No, not the kind from his infamous freak-off parties. Welcome to a typical day in Diddy's new home, MDC, one of the roughest jails in America. After all, Diddy is no longer the king of the music industry. His once flourishing empire came crumbling down in September when he was hit with severe charges, trafficking, racketeering, and the establishment of a criminal enterprise rife with horrific crimes against women. The man who once ruled the S with hit songs and built $1 billion fortune through music, fashion, TV, vodka, and even restaurants now finds himself trading his glitzy life for the grim solitude of a cell. This same man who used to host notorious white parties where celebrities indulged in wild fantasies involving drugs and call girls, now faces a reality where every move is scrutinized. He's not partying anymore. He's being monitored 24/7 by the prison authorities, ensuring he doesn't even scratch his nose without someone watching. Diddy's current residence, the Special Housing Unit SHUA, is placed in the prison reserved for high-risk inmates. He's confined to a tiny barren cell for hours a day. It's no five-star suite. It's bare walls, a thin mattress on an iron bed bolted to the floor, and a sink and toilet all cramped into one tiny space. The former hip-hop mogul is now living the polar opposite of his multi-million-dollar lifestyle, where he once enjoyed sprawling estates with private theaters, spas, beauty salons, and luxury pools. Each morning the alarm blares at 6 a.m. sharp, and he awakens to face yet another monotonous day of isolation. Sleep doesn't come easily in the SU. Despite the relative quiet at night, blood-curdling screams of other inmates occasionally shatter the silence, not to mention the discomfort of sleeping on a rock-hard bed without a pillow. It's a far cry from his $40 million mansion, and he's no longer waking up to serene views or satin sheets. His daily routine now consists of cleaning his tiny cell, making his bed, and scrubbing his toilet and sink. For a man who once commanded legions of staff to attend to his every need, this menial labor must feel degrading. But in a way, these mundane tasks are likely his only solace from the crushing boredom of isolation. And while his wealth might once have bought him the finest gourmet meals, breakfast now arrives through a slot in the door. Cold, bland, and unappetizing, powdered eggs, stale bread, and milk are his new reality. A stark contrast to the lavish $3,000 meals he used to enjoy at New York's finest establishments. His day continues in this repetitive cycle, occasionally interrupted by visits from his family or lawyer. But for the most part, it's just him and his thoughts. He spends hours alone, in silence, with nothing but his reflection and perhaps the company of a few unwelcome cellmates like cockroaches. Yes, Diddy has likely even resorted to naming the critters that crawl across his cell, a grim testament to the madness that isolation can induce. Diddy might get showers a week, solo showers thankfully, but they're hardly an upgrade from the grungy conditions of his cell. Inmates have long complained about the mold-infested showers at MDC, as well as the smell of sewage that seeps into every corner of the building when the toilets malfunction. And malfunctions are common, with reports of overwork orders for repairs at the facility in just 1 month. Had Diddy been placed in the general population, his situation could be even worse. MDC has a reputation for being a breeding ground for violence. It's a place where stabbings happen regularly, where prisoners fashion deadly weapons out of whatever they can find, and where medical care is often denied or delayed. One inmate was even left to bleed in his cell after being stabbed, only to be punished with solitary confinement instead of being treated. Diddy's fame might make him a target for violence, but it could also turn him into a prize, a badge of honor for any inmate who can claim they harmed or killed him. For now, Diddy's wealth offers some small advantages. Despite the prison's grim conditions, he has access to the commissary, allowing him to buy snacks, coffee, tea, and other small comforts. But even with his deep pockets, the most he can spend is $160 every 2 weeks. His once glamorous life of excess is now reduced to small luxuries like candy bars and cheap instant coffee. In his quiet, lonely cell, Diddy might turn to books to pass the time, though his access to the prison library is limited. If he is reading, it's likely legal materials from the jail's Trulink's electronic law library, which offers little beyond the bare minimum of resources. A fellow inmate recently complained that the library is woefully inadequate, saying, "Forget about your constitutional rights. Human rights here are a problem." For now, one thing is certain: the unfolding drama is far from over, and each new lawsuit seems to raise the stakes even higher. While Diddy's current circumstances are a far cry from the lavish lifestyle he once enjoyed, the consequences of his actions, as alleged, could reshape not only his career but the entire entertainment industry. With more accusations looming, potential revelations about other celebrities involved, and the ever-present specter of federal prosecution, the world will be watching closely to see what happens next. For those following the case closely, one thing is clear: this story is just beginning to unfold. The legal battles, public speculation, and new claims continue to paint a picture of a man who, if found guilty, may have orchestrated one of the most shocking criminal enterprises in recent memory. But as we await more details, the public will keep asking who else could be involved and how far-reaching is the impact of these alleged crimes. When Sean Diddy Combs first arrived at the Metropolitan Detention Center (MDC), he was immediately placed on suicide watch. This meant he was under constant supervision, monitored around the clock to ensure he posed no threat to himself. While Diddy is no longer considered to be at imminent risk of self-harm, he remains under close observation by the MDC staff. To get a deeper understanding of what life inside MDC is like for a high-profile inmate such as Diddy, we turn to Dr. Dwayne Hindress, a veteran deputy warden who served at MDC. Dr. Hindress not only has first-hand knowledge of the facility, but he also boasts an extensive career with the U.S. Department of Justice and the Federal Bureau of Prisons. To truly comprehend Diddy's current situation, it helps to understand the inner workings of MDC. The facility, notorious for housing some of the country's most dangerous criminals, has been under scrutiny for years, with many, including Diddy's legal team, labeling its conditions as deplorable. Dr. Hindress, however, offered a more measured perspective. "I worked at MDC Brooklyn as an associate warden between and while it certainly had its challenges like any prison or jail facility, it's not fair to say the conditions were categorically deplorable." During his tenure there, Hindress acknowledges that sanitation and operational difficulties existed, but insists that improvements were made. "By the latter part of my time there, we saw improvements in areas such as sanitation, our relationships with stakeholders, particularly the Public Defender's Office and judicial districts of New York, also strengthened," he said. However, it is undeniable that running a facility like MDC is fraught with challenges, especially when dealing with high-profile inmates like Diddy. MDC Brooklyn has housed some of the most notorious criminals in recent history, from terrorists to drug lords. In such an environment, the stakes are high not just for the inmates, but for the staff tasked with their supervision. Yet despite these difficulties, Dr. Hindress maintains that the facility's primary mission, keeping people safe, has been largely successful over the years. However, safety within the facility has come under intense scrutiny, especially in light of past incidents of suicide and even. It's an unfortunate reality of corrections and jail operations that suicides and homicides do happen, Dr. Hindress admitted. During his time as acting warden, he witnessed suicides, a distressing reality of pretrial detention. Being in pretrial detention can be one of the most mentally challenging times for individuals. They haven't been convicted yet, but they're facing potentially long sentences which can take a severe mental toll, he explained. This psychological strain may be why Diddy was placed on suicide watch upon his arrival. Though it's unclear whether he had any prior criminal history or had previously been incarcerated, the drastic shift from his life of luxury to a confined by cell could be enough to trigger suicidal thoughts. You go from living in a mansion with personal staff and chefs to a small, restrictive cell where your movements are severely limited. For someone like Diddy, this could be an overwhelming mental shock, Dr. Hendras said. Suicide watch at MDC is not a precautionary measure, but rather a response to specific concerns raised by psychologists and clinicians. When someone exhibits signs, whether verbal, written, or physical, of suicidal ideation, they are placed under this heightened level of observation. Inmates on suicide watch are given a special garment called a smock to wear and may not be allowed access to items like undergarments if they're deemed a hanging risk. They are also closely monitored by staff and have regular check-ins with mental health professionals, Dr. Hendras detailed. As of now, Diddy has been removed from suicide watch, but his life inside MDC remains far from ordinary. For his own safety, he is being housed in a protective custody unit away from the general population. Protective custody, often referred to as administrative detention, is reserved for inmates who require extra protection, whether due to the high-profile nature of their case or fear for their safety from other inmates. Inmates in protective custody are usually kept in a special housing unit, though not all are there due to disciplinary reasons, Dr. Hendras explained. Some are under investigation or need to be separated for their own safety, especially in high-profile cases like Diddy's. Given the nature of the charges against him, it's unlikely that he'll be moved into the general population anytime soon. He's a high-profile figure, and in an environment like MDC, you can't take unnecessary risks. At some point, though, he might be moved to a specialized general population unit, but only if it's deemed safe. The specter of past high-profile cases, such as that of Jeffrey Epstein, looms large over MDC Epstein's while in custody at the Metropolitan Correctional Center. In New York shocked the world and raised serious questions about the ability of the Bureau of Prisons to protect its inmates. Lessons learned from that incident are undoubtedly informing how the Bureau is handling Diddy's situation. After Epstein's, the Bureau of Prisons implemented new protocols to avoid such tragedies, especially with high-profile inmates like Diddy, said Dr. Hendras. While protective custody keeps Diddy safe from potential threats, it also comes with significant restrictions in his cell. Diddy has limited access to amenities and spends the majority of his day in isolation. The cell is basic, just a bunk bed, a desk, a chair, a sink, and a toilet. There's also a small mirror not made of glass, so inmates can groom themselves, Dr. Hendras said, painting a stark contrast to Diddy's former life of luxury. There have been rumors circulating that Diddy may be receiving special treatment inside MDC. Claims that he's been granted better meals and more shower time than other inmates. Dr. Hendras quickly dispelled these notions. In a facility like MDC, it's logistically impossible to cater to an individual inmate's specific desires. Meals are prepared days in advance and distributed to all inmates. At most, he could be receiving a common fare if he has dietary restrictions like being a vegetarian or vegan, but that's available to all inmates, Dr. Hendras explained. An average meal at MDC is far from gourmet. Today is Wednesday, so lunch would probably be a burger with fries, a small salad, and maybe some fruit. If Diddy's not a meat eater, he'd get a peanut butter and jelly sandwich with some veggies or fruit, Dr. Hendras shared. The mundane nature of these meals further highlights the stark reality Diddy now faces. Despite the constraints, Diddy's day-to-day life in protective custody likely includes regular check-ins with psychologists, counselors, and other staff to ensure his well-being.